And thank you very much for joining us today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mark Sarko, and I'm one of the humanities librarians here in the MIT libraries. These weekly collaborative sessions are co-hosted by the MIT programs in digital humanities and the MIT libraries, and they're designed to provide an informal forum for researchers to share and discuss ideas around the digital humanities. So today's topic is Archnet 3.0, Enhancing Archnet for Teaching in the Digital Humanities. The Aga Khan Documentation Center at MIT and the Aga Khan Trust for Culture are redeveloping Archnet, which is a freely accessible resource focused on the built environment in societies influenced by Muslim culture. Archnet's mission is to provide ready access to unique textual and media material to facilitate teaching, scholarship, and professional work. So our format today is going to be roughly 45 minutes for presentation, followed by 20 to 15 minutes for Q&A. And we agreed before we all kicked this off formally that we would hold questions to the end, but if you have questions, just please put them in the chat and we'll keep track of those and we'll be sure to get to those by the end. So it is also my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Dr. Michael Toler is the Archnet Content Manager in the Aga Khan Documentation Center in the MIT libraries. Jamie Folsom is Vice President for Development of Performant Solutions Software, which provides web development services for archnet.org. And Dr. Nur Surbers Khan is the newly appointed Program Head for AKDC at MIT. And newly appointed, I believe this is only week 2 for her. So we're absolutely delighted to have her joining us here today. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our presenters.
All right. All right, so I'm sort of going to give the frame and then turn it over to Jamie and Noor for some specific user stories and then most importantly the redevelopment. So just a little bit of context for this. We were talking with Mark and with AJ about doing a something within this series, and we had a couple of topics out there. One that we still very much hope to do at some point, probably I think it looks like next fall, is one on our collections and use of our collections. The Archnet component got pushed a little bit ahead because we're actually right now in the process of redeveloping Archnet. And this workshop sort of format seemed like an excellent opportunity to get a sense of what people think about Archnet, what people think could be, how they think it could be useful, etc. So my goal here really is to just show you through very quickly Archnet as it exists, give you a little bit of the background, and then Jamie will show you Archnet as it will be. At least the back end is developed, and we just spent about an hour today talking about the front end and some very exciting developments in store for that. And we'll share some user stories. It was gratifying actually to ask around people that I thought that might be using Archnet and to find how useful they in fact do find it. So yeah, so that's the plan. I just gave this is the plan, more or less. They're very informal, so we can always deviate from this and change it up as we need to. Okay, so it would help a little bit for those of you that don't know. Looking around, I think most of you do know, but the Aga Khan Documentation Center is, and this is my wording, this is not any sort of official statement or anything like that, but the Aga Khan Documentation Center is a research and documentation center in the Department of Distinctive Collections of the MIT libraries. We used to be under Data and Specialized Services. we're a little bit of everything. We kind of do aspects of the classroom support, the the data and specialized services. We work with sometimes with the GIS people. We do a little bit of everything, but the main focus is collections. It was established at the same time as the Aga Khan program for Islamic architecture in 1979 by an endowment from His Highness the Aga Khan. But it was essentially a library line, a budgetary line. The center as we know it today really only was formalized in 2011, 2010, 2011. There were negotiations and things like that beforehand, really with for two reasons. One was just to consolidate services, consolidate budgets, consolidation. And then the other was to move Archnet from the School of Architecture, where it was developed by the Media Lab under Bill Mitchell, into the libraries where it was felt like it was a better fit. We have a very explicit mandate to not only support the program, that is why the library endowment was set up, but we also have a mandate to make resources available to the wider world, and to be a tool for the promotion of understanding of Islamic architecture writ large. And I decided to pull this little, kind of cheesy, but nonetheless informative diagram from the Future of Libraries Task Force report, because in so many ways, we do this already. That's not to say we do it as effectively as we could. That's not to say that we don't have things to learn from other units of the libraries or from other units of MIT or from outside of MIT. But we do have this, local to global. And in fact, our largest user base by really, depending on the month, but in most months, by twice the size of our second largest user base is India. Our second largest user base is the United States. So, and when I look through our statistics on a regular basis, Google does this weird thing where they're not all countries, it's countries and territories and things like that. And pretty much every, there's like 196 or 200 and some different parts of the world that access ArcNet every month. So it really does have this global reach. Some of our activities, and again, these are just my words. I didn't have as much time as I would have liked to have worked with Matt and Betsy on these. They're here, but some of our activities are, we have rich archival collections of architects, scholars, photographers, etc. We offer subject matter expertise so double and there. We also do our own research projects. We do develop content for ArcNet, very often in collaboration with others. One project I'm particularly enjoying right now is a group of young architects, photographers, students in Nigeria on, they're called the Archives of African Architecture, or A3, in developing documentation of African architecture, because it's an area we're deficient on ArcNet. There's no denying it. South of the Sahara, we are deficient. We're also deficient in some areas north of the Sahara, most notably Libya, but nonetheless. My focus, though, is going to be on these aspects of our work and how they relate to Archnet and what Archnet does. So, hopefully in the future, my colleagues can come back and we can talk about some of the other things. But today, my focus is primarily going to be on Archnet. If you have any burning questions, stop me. But also, as they said earlier, you can put questions in the chat. Okay, so Archnet through time. This was a joke that, or something that Matt actually came up with. In 1985, the Aga program for Islamic architecture put out a laser disc. I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember these. These were they actually came out around the same. It was one of those format wars. They actually came out around the same time as the conventional DVD, digital video disc, but they were LP sized, literally, literally the size of vinyl, like this, and and they were sent all over the place. It was a collection of images of Islamic art and architecture. It was sent all over the place. And so we call that, and some of those images are still in ArcNet. They're not very good resolution. We're working on replacing those. But some of those images are still on ArcNet. So we call that ArcNet 0 point whatever. Then ArcNet version 1 came out in 2003 after extensive, after about a 4-year development period, some of which was not so much development as working things out. But the story, as I recently learned, there's a video actually on ArcNet where Shiraz Ali-Bahi, the co-director of ArcNet, talks about how His Highness had come to MIT and had been very impressed with the work of the program, but lamented the fact that it sort of was remaining here and it wasn't reverberating in areas where he wanted it to reverberate. And Bill Mitchell said, I think we can help you with that. And he developed the proposal for ArcNet as it was developed. It was originally a combination of a sort of a social media, before we really used that term, a virtual community, I guess we would say. And you can see, if you look closely here, you can see my workspace, group workspace, digital calendar, etc., and the digital library. By the time they started thinking about redevelopment, which would have been about, we launched in January 2013. So it would have been about 2012, 2011. By the time they started thinking about redevelopment, you had Facebook, you had all sorts of professional and communal platforms. And it became clear that, a degree of facilitation that we no longer had the ability to do would be necessary to keep this up to date. It was also a bit expensive to run. So the idea of separating out the digital library was conceived, and that was the new ArcNet. I actually find that an immensely appealing idea, because what it has done in effect is there are no barriers to accessing ArcNet. There's no registration, there's no user tracking other than what's done by third-party applications. We have Facebook share, share this and things like that in there. But other than what's done by third-party applications, we retain no information. And of course, everything that is done by Google is anonymized. You know, the frustrating part of that for me as content manager is I'm literally dealing with hundreds of thousands of people, not dealing with, but trying to cater to the needs of hundreds of thousands of people who I will never meet and never be able to ask them, what do you think of this new collection? But it has made it super easy to get into the site. So that was Archnet 2.0. And what I want to do next is just basically whet your appetite a little bit and hopefully encourage you to go in and explore. Archnet is not the most user-friendly site in the world. There are things that we're going to do to change that, and again, Jamie will talk about those more later. But if you do get into it, there are just so many undiscovered gems. I mean, I'm discovering gems. You know, Archnet, before I got here in 2012, Archnet already had a 10-year history. And so occasionally I'd find things that I didn't know were there. So, you know, I think most people are like that. The current holdings, and these are only published holdings, which is significant, especially for names authorities and donor records, but actually the donor records are not published, but the current published holdings are 8,491 site records. And those are either specific structures, a building, or complexes. So for example, MIT could be a site record. And then buildings at MIT would be child sites of the complex, of the larger campus. So 8,491 documented in varying degrees of detail. There is basic information on all of them. And many of them have these extended narrative histories or narrative descriptions that describe the site and its development over time. There are 9,530 publications or files. That's a little misleading because chapters are counted as a publication, but it's still quite a lot. And it's something that is growing every day. And one of my ambitions is to use our publications, or not use our publications, but to allow Archnet to be a platform for scholarship from the region, so that it reaches a wider audience and gets greater exposure. So their volumes, chapters, project briefs, architectural drawings, personal journals, especially for the archives we've gotten. There are, you know, drawings of, and sometimes it's fascinating, actually. You can trace Muhammad Makia was our first archive acquired, and he designed the Khalifa Mosque in Baghdad. And he also submitted a brief. Ultimately, I can't say for sure, actually. Betsy probably could say for sure whether he was selected or not, but the project was never built. There were several briefs submitted, but the project was never built. So we have this history of his original intentions for the site through to his plans to substantially expand the site, including sketches on you know, scrap paper and things like that. And it's really fascinating, if you admire a creative person, to be able to see in that much detail their process as they went through it. Something that has come to our attention as being more useful than I think we had previously realized are the names authorities. So there are 1,136, and this is literally as of today, names authorities. there are 7,500 names authorities operative within the site, but if we don't have any information other than the name, then the name authority itself is not published. If you conduct a search, it will operate and you will see everything that has that name on it. You just won't see an authority entry per se. So anyway, there are and there architects, agencies, photographers, authors, editors, cities. We use authorities for city records. One of the reasons why we do that is because it gives us the opportunity for alternate names, so that if you look for an older name of a city or the francophone spelling of a city or something like that, you can find it. And although these are not published, I like to mention that aside from, not including AKTC, the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, the Aga Khan Program for Islamic Architecture, and the MIT libraries, and for that matter, I should have added here the Harvard Fine Arts Library. They're not included in this number. We have over 640 donors of material to Archnet. So those can be either gifts, outright gifts, where the material has been given to us, or they can be licenses where we are simply sharing the material. One of our ambitions is to become a one-stop shopping kind of place where people can find, you know, as much as is possible of what they need. Even if they can't actually obtain it from us. So if someone needs a high resolution copy of an image, for example, probably 60% of the time we can give that to them. They may also have to contact the museum that has rights for it. But that's something I'm very proud of, actually. Archnet really is, even though the collaborative space went away, it still is a very collaborative space, and it would not be possible without these donors and contributors. Everything from photographs of, you know, one trip where someone took lots of pictures of the Rome Mosque. That's one I got recently. To people's full archives, where, like Yasser Tabah, who's one of the leading scholars of Islamic architecture, he retired, and he's given us his whole archive. We will soon be getting the archive of Renato Holud. So yeah, it's quite a bit of stuff. There is content in over 20 languages. That's not to say there's a huge amount of content in all of those languages. Most of our material is in English. Probably the second largest body of material is in Arabic. The third largest is in French. But we have material in Russian, Greek. We have quite a bit in Farsi. Actually, not that much in Farsi, now that I think about it. We have material in Chinese. We have material in Urdu. We have material in Bambara. This is a video of Ganawa, so that's at least partially in Bambara. This is a video that's in Urdu. So we have we're trying very hard to solicit material in a wide variety of range of languages. The problem right now, and again, this is something I keep looking at Jamie, poor Jamie is getting my list piled on top of him, but this is something that is going to be fixed. Right now, especially the right to left languages are not searchable in ArcNet. ArcNet pretty much searches 4 characters. The anywhere search searches 4 characters as they are in the order they are. So it doesn't know what to do, even though it displays, we put these names in the records and then they display fine, but it can't search for them. So that's something that hopefully will be remedied very soon. And we're actually on a, we're ahead of pace, again, thanks to Jamie and Performant. It's been nice to, our previous developer was chosen by the Trust for Culture, and they did a great job. They made a very pretty site, but they didn't understand academia. And now we're working with a firm that understands academia, understands digital humanities, understands why it might matter to someone that they can refine their search in a certain way, or that they might want to look for something in its original language as opposed to a translated or transliterated version of the language, etc. The coverage is from the pre-Islamic period to the postmodern, including revivalist, Mudehar, Western architecture influenced by the Islamic world. And one of the things that I find most fascinating and am working very hard on is contemporaneous Muslim and non-Muslim communities. Where do these Islamic elements show up in a Hindu temple or in a synagogue? And where do these, Jewish or Hindu elements show up in a mosque? There's actually a synagogue in Tangier that's now being revived as a museum that has the interior is completely decorated in Andalusian style, including Arabic script, um, uh, all sorts of interesting things. So it has primary and secondary sources, and then it has original material that's developed for Archnet and licensed material. But anything in Archnet is in there unless it's old. Anything that's in Archnet is in there at a resolution that is suitable for on-screen display, suitable for in-class use. And essentially, if you want to publish it, we have to send you a high-res copy. And that's not because we will automatically send it if it's ours. We will pretty much automatically send it. Anything that is, and when I say nonprofit and educational, that also includes presses, even though they're technically presses, money making or private enterprise presses. The only things that we probably would want to think twice about, and we've never been asked about, would be, if Coca-Cola or Exxon wanted to use our images, but other than that, our definition of what is educational and what is nonprofit is very, very, very broad. This is just a sampling of images. I wanted to throw in, well, I'm a librarian, so there has to be a cat. That's a cat on the stairs in Turkey. They were painted. That's actually an interesting story. This Turkish man who had a shop next to them painted them in rainbow colors. And then the Turkish government decided that that was some sort of gay pride symbol or something. This poor man had never thought of that, but so they repainted him gray. And then the community said, we like those rainbow steps, and they repainted them rainbows. And as far as I know, they have remained rainbow ever since. And it did also become a rallying cry for the LGBTQ community, because it was clearly an act of erasure for them. I chose these images just to give you a wide variety of the types of things we cover. So, we have now these big panoramas. We have very old images, including engravings. We have, this is the image you see of the man who looks like he's beginning to pray. That's actually a cemetery that was decorated by Azra from here at MIT. And then you have the other one that I'm particularly proud of is this. We've been working with a photographer who is very well known for illustrating art books, and the what is it? American Council for Research in Egypt or something, ACRE. They recently restored an active monastery, the Red Monastery, and there are these Byzantine paintings in there. And this is one of the very rare paintings you will see. This is a detail from it of the Virgin Mary actually breastfeeding, the baby Jesus. You have up in the top corner, I realize actually I'm a little short on actual mosques and monuments, but the second from the bottom is a church in New Orleans that looks like it could have come out of Andalusian Spain. The we have bridges. We have the bridge near the bottom is the Tabiat pedestrian bridge in Iran. That was a recipient of the Aga Khan Award for architecture. You have the gardens of the Generalife in Spain. You have the National Library of Rabat. That's the mural on the side over here. So that's just to give you an idea of the types of things we have. And that may be, okay, so the only other thing I wanted to do, I'm not going to go into too much detail on the search. I'd be happy to do that if anybody wants to see that. The search is a bit, so we have a basic search that isn't all that basic. And then we have a group search, which is a lifesaver for those of us who are, especially me as content manager. If I want to find mosques, Abbasid mosques in Cairo and Maronid madrasas in Fez, I can actually do that in one search, but it's kind of a complicated set of logic that you have to think through. But I wanted to just go through this menu. I'm not actually going to go into the site. I can do this later if you'd like, but I wanted to go through this menu and just show you. So this will bring up the search. What it does is it raises this bottom bar, and you can search using, I've come to call them filters and rules. The filters are on the side, and then the rules are the things, includes, excludes, etc. And I've just done that in my pedagogical materials about the site, just to make a distinction so that people understand. But they're essentially all filters in librarian terms. Timeline is our most popular entry page for non-specialist, because what it is I should have done a screenshot of that, but it's a dynastic history of the major dynasties and styles in Islamic architecture. You actually saw a little earlier the collections page. So this is the collections page. It will open to a page that shows all of our major collections. Doesn't show everything because not everything is in a collection, but it shows all of our major collections. And then you can use this menu underneath that to browse to specific, what we're in right now is the performing arts collection. And and then resources is the same thing. It's just an alphabetized list. Pedagogy is something we would love to work with anyone on who's interested in working on. This is developing resources for teaching about Islamic art and architecture. Archnet is in itself a pedagogical tool. The timeline is certainly a pedagogical tool, but we're interested in developing more. And then this is the, you can get to these in other ways, but this is the Aga Khan Historic Cities Program, and this is the Aga Khan Award for Architecture. And I think that's all I really wanted to show you. Let's, oh yeah, this is, so I will of course make this slideshow available to, I don't know how you would want to do it, or, and we could possibly post it as well, but these are ways to get help. If you are like me and you're often reluctant to actually ask a person for help, we do have some tools. Some of them need to be updated, but in the self-guided help at the top. But also, I can't stress enough that you should feel free to contact us. Archnet at mit.edu goes to all of my colleagues, goes to all of us at the center, actually. And you can also contact me at mtoler at mit.edu. And yeah, and if we can find a mutually convenient time, I'm even helpful to do, I'm even willing to do demonstrations for classes or to talk people through things. So yeah, and now I'll turn it over to, what do we want to do next? Case stories, or Jamie, do you want to go next?
I'm happy to go, whatever you'd like.
Yeah, I
Why
think we
don't you?
had said Jamie, so I'm happy to go last, and because I have kind of the least to say as the newest member of the
Okay.
team. So yeah, we should probably just let Jamie go ahead if that's all right
Good.
with both of you.
That is all right with me.
Great.
Very good. Very good. Thrilled to be with you all, and thank you so much for the invitation, Erica and Michael and HA and others. And thrilled to see some familiar faces. As some of you may know, I actually got my start in digital humanities at MIT. I worked with Kurt Fent in HyperStudio on projects with Jeff Ravel and Wynne Kelly and others. The Comédie Française Registers Project and the Annotation Studio and various things. And I think I met Erica through that in that period of my my career in digital humanities. So I'm thrilled to be back and talking with you again. So I will share my screen as well, and I'll bring up, I don't have slides so much as browser tabs. And I'll talk a little bit about, first about kind of who I am and what my company, and then some about what we've been doing with Michael and his team on Archnet. So we are Performant Software. We're a small software company. We're 8 people. We have 4 full-time developers, my business partner, Nick Lycona, and myself, and some staff based both in Boston and in Charlottesville, Virginia. We focus exclusively on the digital humanities. So we're a software company, but this is our field of choice. We don't really do anything outside of DH. I joined Michael and Shiraz and their team at AKDC and AKTC a few years ago, or we did. We were invited to engage with them to kind of take over the management and the maintenance and hosting of the existing Archnet site. So I can't claim any credit or blame for the current site as it exists, except insofar as the fact that it's running, that it performs correctly most of the time, and that we're kind of helping keep it going. The other thing that we have agreed with the Aga Khan Documentation Center and the Trust for Culture to work on is what we're calling a complete rebuild of the Archnet site. So what you're looking at here is a kind of an excerpt of a document that I prepared to kind of get us oriented to this rebuild. The idea of the rebuild is to provide a new foundation for Archnet and a better user experience. So really, what we're trying to do with this rebuild is to take this incredible, wonderful resource, which already is so useful to so many people, as Michael said, all over the world, and to make it to serve those audiences better. And there's a lot of different ways we can go about that. But we started by thinking about sort of who are those key constituencies, who are the folks that are using it most, and what do they need to improve their quality of life. So I'll bring up a couple of things. I'll just show you quickly the site itself. This is a single site record that's a house in Indonesia. As you can see, it's got a lot of images associated with it. This is a huge part of what the site does really well, is orient, kind of present images of these sites. It's got a great deal of very rich metadata, associated names, people who are involved, and the client, the architect, the planner, the firm, that sort of thing. A good deal of highly kind of curated metadata content about building types and usages, keywords, collections, and that sort of thing. As I said, lots of images. So it's a very rich, very complex data model that backs this site up, and it's presented in a very beautiful way. And that's kind of a key thing about how it works now. That's good. But it's built on some older technology, and by old in web terms, I mean kind of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, not ancient, but old enough that it's beginning to be difficult to maintain. So one of our jobs is to bring that technology up to date, and make it run faster, make it more secure, and those sorts of things. And those are key concerns for a couple of important constituencies. So what we did was we started with a process of discovery around kind of who are the key constituencies who use this site. And as you can see here, we've prioritized each of these rows as a different possible kind of group of users. We've prioritized these users, and a lot of the first tier of users who we are focusing on for this rebuild project are content managers, librarians, scholars, people who are among those who are adding the content to the site, and we want to make it easier, quicker, and a better experience for them to add content to the site. We're about at that point in the rebuild process where we've almost completed that section of the work. So we've rebuilt the content management system completely from scratch with a sort of a new architecture that we think will support the site better and into the future. But we also obviously want to serve those folks on mobile phones who are in India or the Middle East or North Africa. We want to serve scholars and teachers, instructors who want to use this content in their classes. So we've got those folks listed here too. And based on those on this list, this kind of research we've done around users, we've begun to take this existing database and all of the existing assets, the exact data model that was developed for the existing site, and rebuild it with a brand new front end. So I'll show you a little bit about how that looks. Just quickly, let's see here. I'll show you the current content management system. Just to give you a sense of like a single site and what goes into a single site. Here you can see there's a basic record with all kinds of those keywords and that metadata, a description of a site. This is a single site here. You can see that's a television studio, basically. Geographical and technical information, and then a huge number of associated records. And these are, by and large, images, videos, documents, and then other sites, other data objects in the system. So the easier we make it for those content management folks to do their job, the more content they can add, the better we can also serve that worldwide audience. I won't go through all these tabs, but I will just show you quickly what the new admin interface looks like. We haven't yet built the front end, which is used by users, or used by end users, but we have more or less completed this content management system interface for librarians. So here you can see one view of the list of sites. We can view that same list in a number of different ways. There actually isn't a list view at all, and this kind of goes back to your question, Marjorie, about an index of content. There's no real index of content either on the front end or in the librarian view as of now. This is the one exception. The collections area of the site does have a kind of a list of collections, but otherwise there's no list of sites or images unless you do a search. So we felt like that was an important first step. So there is now a list of each of these types of things: documents, images, videos, authorities, collections, etc. We can do that in a couple of different ways. We can sort it, we can filter it. Here you can see, actually I did this here, let me do this here. So let's look for Aga Khan Award winners only, and only things in Senegal, for example. So we can now do a search on any of these filters and create a filtered list. This filter sticks, so even if I'm working on adding new content elsewhere, I can come back to this page and this filter will be persistent. Here's what it looks like to actually work with a record now in this new backend that we've built. You can see those associations, those site names, associated names, description. You've got a sort of a metadata block here that travels with you. You can slide down and look at add associated objects from elsewhere in the back end, and so on. You can see also we've got all those other tabs, geography. This is the view that we have for images and video. We've got a way of filtering. If you only want to see images or only video, you can do that. We've got a bulk upload feature that allows you to add new media here or link existing media. And here we can select from existing images that are already in the system. And so on. I think there's a bit more I'd like to say, but this has been our main focus up to this point, is really making this easier. We can directly move from place to place much more quickly here. And we think it's going to be a big improvement for content management folks. So we're in the process now of thinking about how the front end is going to work and how it's going to be better, quicker, and different for those folks who are using this content. We've gotten as far as to begin to think through the sitemap. We think we're going to pull up to the top cross sections of all of these key kinds of content. So you'll be able to access an index of sites, of authorities, a lot of the content types that Michael mentioned, of media objects, whether video, document, or images, and collections. And what we think is going to be really powerful about this approach is that in addition to providing that kind of a list-based index, whether that's in a kind of a grid or a masonry layout, we're also going to allow users to, for content that has a temporal or spatial dimension, to see that same list of sites or of collections or whatever it is in a timeline view or in a map view, sort of a couple of different lenses. And we're going to offer them ways to filter, sort, and group that content so they can quickly browse through, not have to use a heavyweight search to find what they want. As I mentioned, a great number of the users that are currently using the site are on touchscreen devices, mobile devices, and on slow bandwidth networks. So we're going to have a real focus on a mobile first approach to that front end for end users. And then from there, build up toward desktop users as a second consideration. So we think this is going to be very fast, very easy to use, and we hope will attract more users and new users to the site. I'd be happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. I could talk more about the technology side of things. As I mentioned, we completely re-architected the site. We have very exciting ideas about how we're going to do the front end. Happy to talk about any of that, but I don't want to take all the time. So let me pause there and maybe hand it off back to Erica and anyone else who might have a question.
I think Nora, did you want to go ahead?
Oh, right, of course.
Yeah. Let me just okay, how much time do we have? I should ask Erica and Mark that.
We've got about 5 minutes or so.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's fine. I don't think I have more than that to contribute, to be
Okay.
honest with you. So 5 minutes is perfect. And maybe that can just be like a good segue actually into the wider discussion if the audience has questions. So I was asked by Michael to talk a little bit about user stories, sort of, I guess how academics or researchers are engaging with Archnet. And as someone who until a week ago was on the other side of Archnet, I guess I'm probably best placed to talk about that. So one thing I will say is that so basically some of you in the audience might know me from a previous incarnation when I was a curator at the British Library, and then I took out time while I was there, and I was granted a leave of absence to go and teach actually for a year in Karachi. So I spent oh, that's okay. So I spent, no worries. I think we can just segue nicely into a discussion, Michael, so it's no problem. So I spent basically a year teaching it at a new liberal arts university in Karachi called Habib University. And part of their remit is that their Islamic studies program had a very big focus on Islamic art and aesthetics. And so a lot of my teaching, both to kind of first year undergraduates as well as to more advanced levels of undergraduates, was around, the history of Islamic art, architecture, aesthetics. I did a course that was kind of a really ambitious, broad, sweeping overview of, the history of Islamic art and visual culture, kind of from the birth of the emergence of something that we can identify as Islam into kind of modern, like contemporary art in Pakistan and truck art and things like this. So anyway, it was a huge course, and it kind of was as ambitious and broad as Archnet is as well in its scope. So I was just trying to get as much in as possible. And the one thing I can say in terms of user stories is that all of my teaching prior to this had been in the UK, right? So you have great access to libraries, great access to digital resources, and then teaching in Karachi really brought home the fact that, and it was my first experience teaching in a university that very much identifies itself as being a site of knowledge production in the global South. Like it very self-consciously sees itself as that. And getting access to academic publications, resources, to images, to credible sources of knowledge around timelines. And, really I wound up turning to Archnet again and again throughout the course. And it was really, I leaned very, very, very heavily on that resource throughout the sort of 16 weeks of the course on Islamic art and visual culture in particular. So my user story is basically just about, it's my story, and it's the way that the resources in Archnet, especially things like the publications that have been put online, as well as the images and the contextual information around them, were really essential actually for me to be able to do my job, not being at a university situated in the kind of circles of privilege of the global North. So it was an amazing resource. And the fact that it's completely free and there's no paywall and it's fully available, I feel like, it was really serving one of its main purposes that, I understand was one of the reasons why it was created, which is to provide, scholarly resources for scholars as well as general audiences in Muslim majority countries. So I can attest that is definitely one of the purposes that it's serving. And one of the things I really want to do, and following on from something that Michael said about giving a platform to and kind of showcasing the scholarship of scholars working on Islamic art and architecture in Muslim majority countries, maybe writing in other languages as well, like, Arabic or Persian or Turkish, Urdu. I also would like to create collaborative content creating projects with researchers who are working. For me, like, I know Karachi best because I was just there, but Michael has this amazing project set up with scholars in Nigeria that I think, will be amazing for providing new content to the, to Archnet. So these are some of my experiences and some of my ideas and some of the ways that I hope to contribute to Archnet as the new program head of AKDC. And seeing as we have the whole team here, Matt and Betsy are here as well, our colleagues in AKDC, they're welcome to jump in as well if they have any examples or anything to add about user stories and the way that Archnet gets used kind of in the academy. or more broadly, I mean, research and knowledge production don't just happen in the academy, right? So, you know, examples more broadly of how the images get used by artists maybe, or by, you know, community groups, you know, historians, researchers who are operating outside of kind of, you know, the academic world. So, yes, so maybe we could just open up for discussion, Erica and Mark, if that's makes sense to you, yeah?
Yeah, that's great. We're almost at time, but I think, yeah, we can squeeze in a few questions. And I just wanted to highlight the comment in the chat from Marjorie. I don't know if you saw that or not, Michael, but she made the comment that that what you were talking about in terms of the elements of the or Islamic elements in other kinds of structures, that's exactly what she teaches. And I have to say, I'm really fascinated with that kind of thing as well. But are there other, we have maybe a minute or two, like, is there a quick question or two for
I'm interested in the IIIF question, actually.
Yeah,
that's a really good one.
This is great, and Michael, thank you for reminding me that that there are high-res versions. Of course, there are. That makes perfect sense. That's your purpose in some ways, and as a center. There's no reason we couldn't add IIIF images. We have a great deal of experience with IIIF. We use it in a lot of the projects we do. I think that would be really powerful to, you know, we've got nice versions of these images already that are kind of a smaller format, but I have no doubt that there's detail that we could offer by making those available in much higher resolution. So yeah, that's a great idea.
One of the things I'd be interested in hearing from people, not necessarily now because we are so close to time, but in the same question, the issue of APIs came up, and you know, right now it's challenging. We can do it on the back end, but it's challenging for front end users to import or export data to Archnet. And that's something we're working on. But I'd be very interested in hearing, and again, it doesn't have to be here, feel free to email us, but what sort of things would you like to do? Because that will give us some fodder for thinking about how we can facilitate those things. So please feel free to send your suggestions.
One thing that, I mean, I love this presentation, but that I find very frustrating is, so for example, I was asked to observe a class in ancient and medieval studies, and they were doing the period that is one of the great flowerings of Islamic architecture and art and literature in the West. And they didn't mention it. And it was a team taught course. But so what I'm wondering is how to get the rich archive, but also the attention that this period and this culture represents into the mainstream. And I was wondering, is there some way that you guys could get the ancient and medieval people who teach that to incorporate the Islamic production into our very Western centric courses? And I just wondered if you had thought about that at all, ways of expanding your reach.
I can talk a bit about that, but Michael, you've got more. You probably have a more specific.
No, you go ahead. Actually,
example, but so this is something that I was working to do very hard in the UK, which is get sort of histories of, you know, Mughal India introduced into just the mainstream history curriculum, so that it's not considered this kind of other history. It's just history, right? And so that really becomes a question of curriculum reform as such, right? And what I discovered, and this is something I think I first started trying to work on this in 2012, and I can't say that with all of my like attempts to outreach and network and do workshops and upskilling and that it's actually made much of an impact in mainstream academia in the UK. I can't say that it has. But what I've discovered through those efforts is that there's always a great deal of goodwill, right? Someone teaching, you know, a global history course, for instance, who maybe has a training in European history, but not in South Asian history, the goodwill is there. They really would like to know about, you know, histories of the Islamic world. It's just a question of having the content and the knowledge to actually do that and present that information. So maybe what I've found is like pedagogical workshops that kind of give, you know, depending on the level of kind of education you're working at. I've kind of done these both for secondary school teachers, primary school teachers, as well as university lecturers. You know, so that's one way. I think, you know, maybe doing some pedagogical workshops that engages people with Archnet as a resource might actually be a way to both, like, you know, kind of upskill and give, you know, some structure and you know, knowledge to people who might not be trained in the history of the Islamic world, whilst also introducing Archnet into their teaching practice. But I'll let Michael talk a bit about that as well, and of course Matt and Betsy jump in also if you've got some experience in that area too.
That's part of the goal of the pedagogy project. You know, one of the those if you ever want to have a look at them, there for example, there are some PowerPoint presentations in there, and they are completely, you can download them and use them exactly as they are if you want. You can also download them and make all sorts of changes. They're completely at your disposition to do what you want with. But the real point I wanted to make with them is where we've been having the most trouble developing the pedagogy project is the K through 12 component, you know, for a number of reasons. K through 12 teachers tend to be very concerned, for good reason, about standards and about, you know, I mean, we talk about teaching to the exam, they have to teach to the exam. So, you know, so we've been having issues with that. I do think I agree with you, Nur, exactly about, you know, workshops and pedagogical materials. And also, I think trying to sort of operating in the back of my mind is helping people to see how it might matter to them. You know, I grew up in Richmond, Virginia, and right now Richmond has a significant Muslim community, but when I was young, it did not. But yet it had a theater, a Shriners, I think it was the Shriners, a Shriners theater that was literally and offensively called the Mosque. And it had fake minarets, and it had, and all of the, it had Syrian tile work inside. I mean, they imported all of this stuff and built it. And I guarantee you that 95% of the people, including me, until I, you know, actually went to Morocco and began to learn a little more, had no idea that had anything to, that aesthetic had anything to do with the Muslim world. It was just beautiful and cool. So that's another thing that I think can be helpful, is to help people to see that it's not, you know, there's this false dichotomy that has gotten set up in the West of them and us, the Muslim world and the Western world and all of that. And I think the more we can break that down, the better. And I think aesthetics is a nice, non-threatening way to do that. You know.
Wow. Well, I hate to cut this short, because it was such a fantastic presentation, but we are a little past time, and I want to respect everyone's time. But thank you all so much for an amazing presentation, and just it's an amazing resource, and you've given us all food for thought for all kinds of topics. So thank you very much. And thank you all for joining us. Please have a wonderful evening, and we hope to see you all soon. So take care, everyone.
Thank you.